A Republican candidate in Georgia who believes in QAnon conspiracies is almost sure to be elected to Congress in November after winning her primary runoff. On the bright side, C-SPAN will be a lot more interesting when a member of Congress is wearing a tinfoil hat.
So will this podcast when we all wear
I can't
tinfoil
wait.
hats.
Definitely can't wait.
Medical experts in Britain say the country may have to sacrifice pubs and restaurants for the sake of public safety. Brits will just have to eat blood sausage and kidney pie from the disgust of their own home.
Take that, Britain. And finally, the White House denies asking about adding President Trump's face to Mount Rushmore. That would be ridiculous. They asked about having Trump's face replace Mount Rushmore. The Trump Report starts now. And yes, here we are, myself, Christian Bladt, Tamra Brown, and the one, the only, the Scott Moore. I'm sure there's like millions of Scott Moores, but you're the only one that matters.
That's right.
So obviously, you know, we always did this show on Tuesdays for a long time. And I will announce here that we're going to do Fridays for August because we want to be able to let the conventions or what's going to pass for the conventions unwind over the next couple weeks. So we'll do convention wrap-ups on Fridays around noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. So we decided to do that this week. And I've never been more glad to not be doing a show Tuesday at 11 a.m. than when Joe Biden announced his running mate at I think it was 12:15. So yeah, that would have been a waste of time. So,
and I for one was floored with the announcement.
You were shocked that that he didn't.
He needed some smelling spices.
Yeah, well,
to recover.
I'll say that I think they did a good job of keeping us guessing, but that was sort of like the obvious guess that a lot of people had. I think that maybe Stacey Abrams thought she had a chance, but I don't know how many other people really thought that they were being considered. Tamra, so it's not a surprise, but
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I said if we had the technical capabilities, right now is when I would hit play on the montage of myself over the past year saying it's going to be Kamala. It's going to be Kamala.
Yeah. And every time you said that, we would have a close up of Chelsea throwing up in her mouth a little bit, but also
immediately followed up with Chelsea's.
Yeah. But also off in the distance, Drexel being very excited because this is his dream running mate. I don't know that it's his dream candidate, but he obviously preferred Biden to a number of others. But for you, Tamra, so not a surprise, but what are your thoughts about her? What do you think she brings to the ticket? And also, what areas are you most concerned about?
So Kamala has been considered a moderate, right? And a lot of progressives criticize her record as San Francisco DA and as California's Attorney General in the early 2000s. And understandably, especially right now with so much focus on policing reform, criminal justice reform, and things like that, now more than ever is a point in time when you could hold a former district attorney accountable for, placing innocent people in prison for most of their life and not holding police accountable. But I have been following there's a deputy public defender from San Francisco who has been speaking out in favor of Kamala, saying she is the most progressive DA and Attorney General that California has, and she's made a lot of really valid points. Now, my general position, and this is something that's coming into focus right now because I'm so sort of entrenched in Los Angeles's district attorney race between Jackie Lacey and George Gascon, and I am, even though complete supporter of Black Lives Matter, and I will ultimately, vote for the candidate that is BLM supported. However, in the case of Jackie Lacey, versus Gascon. I don't want to spend too much time talking about such a local race, but anyway, it's really tricky to say how culpable a district attorney is, because despite what that person's personal agenda may be, the office of district attorney is broken. The institution is broken. So you can be a progressive person, you can be you can be forward thinking, but you are held to the political office that you have been elected to. And so there's so much internal reform that needs to be made. So my point is that as far as holding Kamala accountable for things that took place when she was district attorney, which when it comes to marijuana convictions, I do think that she is very wrongly accused of ruining people's lives through marijuana convictions. She really did more for not making marijuana convictions a misdemeanor, and not even in, impacting their record as little as possible that her position allowed her to. Um, but anyway, I think that she has been really unfairly criticized for things that are the responsibility of the office more so than the person that holds that office.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely the areas of concern. I also can see her, how many tweets does President Trump have that say law and order? It's a rhetorical question. I don't actually care what it is, but that is something that does appeal to some people. And I think that, you do have to wonder about considerations for people who want to remake our criminal justice system. But for people who are, less invested in that specific issue, that's not what they're interested in. I do think she is more appealing to not your diehard Trump voters, but I think your moderates, your independents. Were you going to say something,
Well, I
Tamra?
was just
Yeah,
going to say, I don't think I answered the question. So I am, I think, getting more and more in favor of Kamala than I
sure.
had been previously. Now that I'm hearing the people who worked in her office when she was district attorney, and in her office when she was attorney general, saying that she really was far more progressive than that office tends to allow. And also, she's only gotten more and more progressive as once she became a senator. She absolutely she authored and promoted many criminal justice reform initiatives. So she's become more progressive, which I
Sure.
think I'm in favor of. Obviously a lot of people, that's a mark against her.
So, Scott, your thoughts on the pick, if there was any element of surprise, and same question, really. What do you think she brings to the Biden ticket that's a favorable, and what are the negatives?
No, I mean, we could have said it from the very beginning. This was not a surprise. She
Yeah,
was kind of ranked.
we actually taped this show 2 weeks ago, we just know
Yes.
we're right. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, this is what, August 3rd. But yeah, I mean, look, she was listed as number one on the short list for months and months and months. So I think my only surprise was not being surprised, because I kept thinking maybe that was going to be a distraction at the last minute. He was going to pull somebody else that may not have been as well known, may not have had a deep record that would make it more difficult for the opposition to be able to try to figure out, how to attack that person. So again, it wasn't a surprise, because she was basically there from the very beginning, and it goes back to Joe Biden's mantra of like do no harm, in the scheme of let's get somebody who can be painted sort of as a moderate, even though, like Tamara was saying, does have a lot of progressive policies for her, but to the nation at large, it might be able to help in some of those suburbs and exurbs in some of those red areas, red states, that really went heavily Democratic during the midterms, that you will need to pick up those votes in order to, carry Biden to victory in some of those battleground states. That said, I think they seem to still be having an issue being able to paint Kamala Harris into, they're calling her radical. This is, Republicans and Trump, but then they're also calling her, an aggressive prosecutor. So you can't really have it both ways there. They're saying she wants to defund the police, but they're also calling her, like we were saying, a prosecutor that, put a lot of people away for marijuana convictions and stuff. So I think the Trump campaign is still having issues being able to figure out who she is and what's the best attack strategy. And they've had the same issue with Joe Biden as well. I've started to see some people today on Twitter, like Matt Schlapp and a couple other people, have started to position it as a California thing, which to me was the greatest concern, is that they're going to use the, liberal California vote to try to scare some of those moderate voters again, those same suburban, as Trump calls suburban housewives, that vote. I think part of their strategy now is going to be trying to scare them with linking Kamala Harris to the liberal California lifestyle, the high taxes, the homelessness, all those other issues that a lot of places in moderate and middle America tend to have that stereotype about California. So I think that's going to be starting their new strategy. And I think that is her biggest negative for those moderate voters. But I also believe that we're kind of getting past that stereotype as well, and that most voters are smart enough to be able to look at the issues and look at the people that are running and hopefully not fall into that trap. But I think that's going to be their next tactic, and to me is her biggest flaw besides everything else, because otherwise she appeals to a wide swath of voters. She does have that kind of Obama-esque great speaking ability, great backstory of like where her family comes from, great story about what she did and what she has become. So it's a good
performance
appealing.
in the Kavanaugh trial. That was
exactly, and Bill Barr in that testimony. So she's got a lot of assets that are going to help, but I think the California thing will be something they're going to try to play on, since that's their boogeyman.
Yeah, from what I understand, she is not polling well amongst people who refer to California as Holly weird and think that it's actually very clever, but they'll conversationally use that phrase. But yeah, I think that
California.
Yeah, well, there's that too. Yeah, and it's interesting because the President Trump's reaction was about how nasty she was to Brett Kavanaugh, which is, I think, for a lot of people, like, oh yeah, thanks for reminding me what I could like about her. It's like I didn't think I liked her, and then oh yeah, you reminded me she was really tough on him. So
she fits that VP role of being able to be that attack dog type person, which a lot of times a candidate will pick a VP that can go for the jugular and be able to have those good arguments, and she does bring that.
Yeah, and in line with VPs, I assume that you both saw this because it was circulating a lot. I really liked the post that Sarah Palin made, which was very non-political and just, saying like, congratulations. And it really is just her and Geraldine Ferraro, and now Kamala Harris. So she's literally the third one. And, there was nothing about politics in there, and, giving good advice, things like trust no one and don't get muzzled. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, they definitely worked very hard to muzzle her. But anyway, I don't know. I thought that it surprised me in that it was so magnanimous and, just congratulatory. I'm sure that if they ask her to, go out and do some anti Harris stump speeching, she probably will. But for that, I don't know. I thought that I was surprised that, like, we don't get surprised a lot, but that one I'm like, because, when you see the headline, I'm like, oh boy, what did Sarah Palin say? And like, oh, it was really nice. So, but what of course
isn't it
is
horrible that it's horrible when I read it, but then the cynical part of me was like, what is she trying to do? Get herself back out there again? Because she's been sort of behind the scenes. She's divorced now, and she's probably thinking like, I need to get back out and that's the horrible side of me.
That's entirely possible. Maybe she's looking to be on Celebrity Big Brother. I'm not really sure. But it's something to keep in mind.
Correspondent.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's the giving us the Alaska perspective from Fox News. Now, what is obviously it's also historic in other ways. So not only is she a woman, not only is she African American, I was going to say half, but I actually don't know what the ratios are, but she's also Asian. So you're getting these three things represented, easy for me to say, on this ticket, which I think this is a very good time to certainly, I mean, we knew all along he was going to pick a woman. I think once he said that, he was not going to be able to go back on that and give Tim Kaine another shot. You know, I don't think that was ever a consideration. He just had to try and remember his name for a second. But in any case, I think that it was so. I think that is significant anytime it happens. You know, if you'd had that in past races. But Tamra, what do you think? How do you think that resonates at this very specific moment in time, that it is that he chose a woman of color, and also a woman of color who also connects with, you know, Asian Americans as well. So it's like you kind of like have a little bit of an extra bonus, you know, of representation.
I think it's more relevant that Kamala is a person of color more so than it's more relevant than that she's a woman, because I don't think, you know, I've been thinking, like, let's say Joe Biden, you know, he's old. If she after let's say he wins, let's say she runs in 2028, could she be president? And I still don't think that this country is ready for a woman to be president. So I think that her gender has less to do with her overall likability at this point in time. Has less to do with her likability than the fact that she is African American and Asian American.
Yeah, no, I do think that the likability will be a problem, and I'm sort of wondering about that long term over the next few months. Now, Scott, I did share this text with you that I can't give credit to the person it was because I didn't make a note of it, but there immediately started being a lot of focus on this Kamala Harris-Mike Pence debate, and the question that I saw posed on Twitter is if Mike Pence would be allowed to sit at the table with Kamala Harris without his wife sitting next to him. And if I knew right away that I was going to steal that joke, I would have made a note as to who it was. I do think it's a very funny sentiment, but I think immediately people started thinking about, you know, sort of that back and forth, you know, what that is going to look like. And what do you think are, you know, if you're part of the team strategizing that one-on-one, which honestly you need to think about because it's, you know, it's like 2 months from today.
Yes. Yeah, less than 2 months is October 7th.
Yeah, you're right. So it's even, yeah, I thought it was the 14th, but you're right. It's even less than 2 months. Yeah. So 7 weeks.
Exactly.
You've already set it on your DVR. You have a,
I've already
season
started
pass.
Ordering the popcorn.
Yeah.
I've already started ordering the popcorn because there's not going to be enough popcorn even in 2 months
fair.
if I start ordering today.
What do you think, you know, how do you think both sides approach that meeting, that interaction?
Well, I guess I don't know how close in proximity Mother has to be from Mike Pence, if she can just be off in the wings, or does she have to actually be on stage, or however they're going to do it. Who knows? That it could be completely remote at this point still too, especially if we really get into the fall and the virus numbers tick up again. But just going back just briefly, I think that, just like I said earlier, I think Kamala's story is something that a lot of people can relate to, which I do again think is an added bonus. It's not just first generation Americans here or immigrants here that happen to be Black or Indian from some continent, India, or Asian or anywhere else, European. And so I think that her story also just relates to something that a lot of Americans today can get behind as well, which I do think is a great added bonus of, like, this is a real American story. But she's good at what she does. If anything, I think she's the one that's going to be on offense in the sense that for her preparation, um, it, compared to what he's going to have to do, because Mike Pence is really going to have to be ready to come back and defend a record, because in a way it's always harder if things are not going well with the incumbent in power to be able to say, this is what we've done. Look at all the great things we've done. This is why we deserve another 4 years. And Donald Trump can't even do that. And so it'll be interesting to see what Mike Pence can actually do when you have someone like Kamala Harris, who is a lawyer, has that prosecuting background, that's going to be able to come right in and again go for those jugular type attacks. He's going to be the one that's really going to need to be prepared and be able to really be prepared to defend this record, because now as the incumbent, they actually have a record where before they didn't, and they could just, go with how they're going to make America great again. But now it's what have you done, and what is she going to be able to do to be able to attack and tear down some of those things that he's going to say.
Yeah, but Tamra, at least Mike Pence has his innate likability to fall back on, and
that raw charisma.
Yeah, so I don't think he's got anything to worry about, right?
It will be a charisma off, because she's got that je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
She's got that that Obama likability. So it will be nice to see a debate with Pence. Despite all of his laughability, he at least can string a sentence together better than our president. So it will be nice to see at least an articulate debate where people are. I will, give him that credit that there will be. I think his only, tactic will be claiming the Democrats are blocking them from doing this. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Democrats' fault, because that's all they've got, and that's their tactic. As we were saying before we started recording, the press conference that the president just had before we started recording, like literally every other word was the Democrats' fault. So I do believe Pence, that will be his tactic, but at least it will, we might get a vocabulary of 12 words instead of the usual 8.
Yeah, I do think you're right that, and look, I think that to a degree that can be very effective, just reminding you what the Democrats are trying to prevent you from, and what they're trying to do to your way of life. Democrats are being blamed for canceling the college football season. So, I think that if there's anything that you don't like, and look, to be fair, Trump is being blamed for things that he might not actually be involved in, but that is definitely the approach. That's the tactic of like, yeah, this is what they want. They want you to be unhappy. They want you to be miserable, and they want you to feel like Uncle Joe is going to, ride in on. Well, I was going to say a white horse, but I don't know that that's the color horse that he's going to choose in 2020. But also, President Trump sounded barely awake in that press conference. So when he's like, yeah, Sleepy Joe, I was like, yeah, but you're the one who sounds like you're tired.
He sounded like he was about 100. Like, I don't know how supporters of his can really listen to him and not hear that.
Yeah. It's like the dailies from a late in his career Marlon Brando movie. You're like,
and the question he also didn't answer the question when they asked about. They specifically said, "What is your brother suffering from?" And he didn't answer that question either. He just said he's very excited to see his brother and how close they are.
Yeah. So that was, I mean, obviously there's no reason to hope anything has befallen his brother. It's just you immediately begin to think like, well, there could be a number of things that they want to respect the privacy. But if he were to have coronavirus, COVID-19, I don't think they'd be in a rush to point that out. I think, and didn't Kimberly Guilfoyle like tested for it? Don Jr.'s girlfriend, but she seems to be fine. She's been out there since then. So, you don't quite know where it's been shared within the extended family. We were talking about some, favorable words for Kamala Harris from Sarah Palin, but from Sarah Palin. And what we haven't gotten is I guess I'm surprised when these things come out, and I shouldn't be, but this happened to John McCain too. The questions about his eligibility, but I think with John McCain, he was actually born overseas, but he had American parents, right? Isn't that what that backstory
Yes.
was?
Well, he was born in the Panama Canal Zone,
Right.
Because his father was in the military and they were
Sure.
based down there. And I mean, it's kind of the same thing with Ted Cruz. He was born in Canada, and I think.
And by the way, don't forget
mom's
that his dad killed JFK.
Of course,
we haven't
right.
talked about that in a while. Yeah, I think it's important to point out that Ted Cruz's dad killed JFK, and then the guy who alleged that is somebody that Ted Cruz goes on TV and very strongly endorses and kowtows to.
And you know what's crazy is John McCain's mom is still alive.
Wow, that is crazy. I actually didn't realize
108 or something.
Good for her.
But yeah, he was born in the Panama Canal Zone, and technically it was not part of Panama at the time because of basically we were running it,
Right.
but we were building it. But the point is that he was born to American parents, and so that's
Right.
still the case today. So if you had two American citizen parents that happen to be overseas that gave birth to their child, they're automatically American
Right.
citizen. Although we've had issues with some of those cases have come up too with adoption, where especially with same-sex couples where one partner is not a U.S. citizen, and there's been issues about them being
Sure.
denied the American citizenship right. So there's there are definitely things that have come up in recent years, but in general, that is the rule. If they're two American citizens, they're born overseas, that baby is still American.
So the issue becomes, and I think that so her parents are immigrants, but she was born in California, so it actually doesn't matter who her parents are, because that's the whole thing about what do they call that, those hotels that they rent out to 15 pregnant Chinese women just so
right, like the anchor babies.
That's it, anchor babies. That's the phrase I was looking for. Yeah.
Yes, and it's a negative term, obviously, but
people know what that is. Yeah.
Exactly. So the reverse is true, that same thing. If you have two immigrant parents, but the baby is born in U.S. soil, then the baby is an American citizen. And of course, Trump had campaigned on that, or had talked about it after his election, on changing that rule to not make it an automatic thing when a baby is born here to immigrant parents, that it would not automatically get citizenship.
Right. But that's neither here nor there, because she is a citizen. And, I think this story got a little bit of headway because of this op-ed that was from Newsweek. And people said, well, it's from a reputable source. And I'm like, so you haven't actually read Newsweek in a long time if you feel that, the sort of the Daily Beast purchased Newsweek, that I believe is no longer a print magazine, but I could be wrong. But I think they don't print it anymore. It's just a website now.
Well, even so, you have to be careful. Like I tell people too, even when you read something from New York Times or Newsweek or anything else, you have to be careful to see, is this an opinion piece? Yeah. Is this an opinion piece? Where is this article at too? Because a lot of people will forward things and be like, look, this is what the New York Times said, or this is what Newsweek said. But then you go to find out it was actually an opinion piece by somebody.
Yeah, but obviously President Trump didn't waste any time jumping on that, because the way to situate those questions, I just don't know. I don't know if she is. I don't know if she's eligible. But meanwhile, why would you perpetuate this idea that she's not eligible to be vice president? Because if you have to skip her in the chain of succession, as we talked about, then Nancy Pelosi is vice president. And who on the right wants Nancy Pelosi to be vice president?
Well, I mean, she wouldn't technically be vice president.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, so basically, if something happened to Joe, then they would skip. So then
she would become acting president.
The acting president. Yeah, you're right. I misspoke what I said. So obviously, this is this is a carefully crafted reaction from the Trump campaign, because she's got immigrant parents, so obviously she can't be vice president.
Carefully crafted.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They were in the lab and they really said say this. This is no, but obviously there is a segment, and you can argue with people as to how large the segment is of Trump supporters that are going to hear that and go, okay, good, she can't be vice president because her parents are immigrants. And I don't want that. says, somebody whose grandfather came over from Italy or Ireland or Germany.
Oh, I'm just laughing at carefully crafted, as if it's more than a racist looking at a person of color saying, that's not an American.
Well, it's carefully crafted in that there's a team of racists. There's not just one or two,
Carefully crafted and carefully crafted in the sense that it's not a blatant saying like, oh, we're only saying this because we're racist. It's just enough to like be like, oh, let's question this.
Yeah,
But
no, I mean, and honestly, that's the new thing out there is like, this is interesting. This raises some points. This is worth investigating. There's something going around from RFK Jr., who is an anti-vaxxer, and him telling you that the reason we should be worried about a coronavirus vaccine, it goes right to Bill Gates and the chips about like why they're not taking cash anymore and how there's a coin shortage. And instead of saying like, man, RFK Jr. is fucking crazy, you say like, interesting, ... something to think about. And it's like, yeah, something to think about how crazy it is. And obviously it was very quickly, there's actually Newsweek even changed the way it's formatted. Right next to that opinion piece is a follow-up that says, yes, Kamala Harris is eligible to be vice president, because they didn't want any confusion. They got all the traffic that they needed from originally publishing the piece, and now they're like, yeah, but we don't really believe it. We just wanted you to see our pop-up ad that prevented you from reading it for 8 seconds. What do you think, Tamra, about not so much this thing, but perpetuating bad ideas by not shooting them down, and just kind of the idea of like, something to think about. I mean, I think that that's certainly where we're at right now with that's a large segment of the population.
I mean, I think that is that was how Fox News came to be what they are today. It was exactly that strategy of not blatantly saying this is what this is, but it is Barack Obama possibly not born in the United States? That the asking the question format is what their initial MO was. That's where that came from, and it works. I mean, that gets people to start thinking something without acknowledging that they're lying. They're just asking the question. So wait, what
well, no, that is, yeah, yeah. Well, Tamara, you finish talking and I'll say, interesting ... question mark. But yeah, and I think that you just need to leave the door open a little crack, and then a whole lot of crazy can come through there, and you hope that crazy votes for you, and speaking of voting, apparently the real way to combat voting by mail is to close the United States Postal Service, and there's a slow erosion there of funding, which that is tied into a bigger issue, which is the fact that obviously the next round of coronavirus stimulus / relief, whatever you want to call it, the checks, that wasn't settled. But you know what? Congress has done, and the Senate, the House and the Senate, Congress has done such a good job. They should go on vacation now, and they can worry about it in September. And I would say that very easy for Democrats to blame Republicans to blame Democrats, but everybody went home. And so it's just a reminder of how terrible they all are, that they didn't think that this was important to settle. But Scott, your reaction to nothing being accomplished?
Well, I'd have to say a lot of the blame does go to Republicans, because the Senate was the one that had decided to adjourn first, and the Democrats did give a follow-up back in May that they sat on, and then they refused to come down, where the Democrats were saying, okay, we'll come down $1 trillion. Again, this is just huge numbers that a normal person cannot even relate to in any sense. Yeah, it's comprehend. And they refused to really do anything to bridge that gap. And if they were taking it seriously, the Senate could have very easily said, hey, we're going to stay in session until, it would have been very easy political move for them to come across as being like, look, we're working for the American people. We're not going to adjourn because we have not had a deal. And the Democrats are so horrible, we couldn't. And now we're going to stay on because of them. And instead, them leaving too after not even helping to negotiate the House passed stuff from May is really horrible. And if they're walking away, then what will the House be doing over those next couple of weeks while they're waiting for them to not do anything? So they're both, yes, I agree optically, but it really was the Senate that had decided to take this adjournment and not actually compromise at all. And then that's where we got into these silly little executive orders last Friday that, again, we're done for optics and not for anything that's really going to make a difference for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, Tamara, the fact that he went on an executive order spree is all well and good, but it actually he can't do any of those things that he said he was going to do. And also, I believe states were going to have to pay 25%. And look, I mean, we don't want to name names, but some of those states don't have 25% of much of anything. They don't have 25% of what they're supposed to have. So, and this, of course, has to be infuriating for Trump, like most things are throughout the course of the day, infuriating for him because he can't do anything about it. He literally can't do anything about it. I mean, he can try, but it's like, yeah, did that thing you signed, did that get me a check before Labor Day? And I don't mean me, somebody considering like, well, he said he did all this. So what do you think that it clearly hurts President Trump? What do you think this does for Biden? Do you think that, he doesn't really have any power, although it seems like him and Kamala Harris are always signing something. They look like they're doing like bill signings. I don't know if those are just, they're writing in each other's yearbooks, their 2020 yearbooks that they hadn't gotten around to writing into yet. But what do you think the impact is of this not passing for Joe Biden?
Who are you asking?
You, Tamara.
I don't think it's going to help or hurt Biden, because like you said, he's not like he's able to do anything. But what was the thing that he just? Oh, it was the. Did he take credit for the Israel UAE deal?
Yeah,
Did he somehow?
somebody from One American News very clearly asked that question, to President Trump during that briefing a little earlier today, and Trump was very quick, like, yeah, I saw that. Sleepy Joe took credit for that. Yeah.
So in something like that, if Trump took credit, well, he does take credit for things that he had absolutely nothing to do with, and his base believes him. His people who are against him call him a liar. Joe Biden is in the trickier position in that if he does something like that, people who are against him call him a liar, but his base also is like, that wasn't cool. You didn't have any hand to do with that. So without switching topics onto that, but it just puts him in the position of he just has to toe the line, continue on the straight and narrow, like don't make a mistake. I don't think it's the issue of stimulus money. He doesn't have a hand in it, so it's not going to help him, but it's also not going to hurt him, as long as he doesn't make a mistake, say something ridiculous that we know that he's capable of saying.
Yeah, I think that honestly, you would hope the campaign doesn't look at it this way, but bad for the American people, which this is probably good for Biden. So they're not celebrating it, but they're like, well, this is 3 weeks where we might be able to make some hay. We only have a few minutes left in the show, and when we join you a week from today, next Friday, we will have I was going to say fun-filled. We'll have something that is going to pass for the Democratic National Convention, which everyone was told don't come to Milwaukee for it. We don't want you here. So obviously, like with everything else, everything's going to be virtual. What I hope is that they pre-tape a lot of these things, because you don't want to try to convince people that, you know, you're ready to be the leader of the free world, and, you know, Biden's camera is like turned like this while he's delivering his speech, and then he's, you know, trying to figure out, like, is it on? What? Yeah, exactly. What time?
Welcome,
Yeah, it's
America.
like,
uh
hello?
yeah. So let's hope they pre-tape some things. But in these final few moments, what do you think we should see out of that week? You know, I mean, look, people still aren't going out that much, even in states like Florida and Colorado and Nevada, where apparently movie theaters are going to be open by next week. Even in those states, people are still not going out that much. So they have an opportunity to speak to people. Honestly, there are people that are probably going to hear for the first time what Joe Biden actually has to say. I'll ask you first, Scott. What do you think the Democrats should try to position their message at? Are there some key points that they should really make throughout the course of this upcoming virtual convention that they're holding next week?
Well, there's kind of 2 points to it. One is, like we've said along, they have to make this race about how the incumbent is doing, because now it's like Trump is the incumbent. He's not the outsider anymore that he claims to be. You know, he is the incumbent. He now has a record. And so one is they've got to draw to that record, but then they also have to make sure that they're not making it all about Trump. And that's still part of the thing, is like, when you do look at polls and the reason why people are voting for Joe Biden, the numbers are really low that they're voting for him. You know, they're actually voting against Trump. So they've also got to strike that balance to be able to say, okay, we're not just anti-Trump, and we're not just going after those voters or having you come vote for us, which, again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how a president wins. It's just the fact that they win. So, you know, if that ends up being a winning strategy for them, so be it, which I think for a lot of people it will be. But you don't want it to all be just about voting against Trump. You also need to bring to the table, what are the things that you are going to do in a Biden-Harris administration? What are the things that are going to work for the American people that are struggling right now with the coronavirus response, that we can say, you know, has not worked? What are we going to do to be able to help with the economy? What are we going to do to help with healthcare and other things to build on Obamacare? What are the things that are going to speak to the everyday American? Because when that's all said and done too, people are going to be looking at how they're feeling with the economy, how they're feeling with their health, and how they're feeling on the incumbent record, and that's how they're going to vote accordingly. But they've got to strike that balance of being, yes, you need to vote against this incumbent because his record is terrible and he's terrible, but here's also what we are going to do, and here's the reason why you need to vote for us. And so they've got to carefully orchestrate that balance in a good way to be able to appeal to both there, and to be able to appeal to some moderate Republicans who are not Trump, never Trumpers, never will be, or some other people that might have voted for Trump in 16 who are turned off, and they've got to be able to get those people out too, and get them to vote as well. So they do have a little bit of a challenge on their hands, but it'll be interesting this time next week to see how they do.
And Tamara, how do you think that they position themselves as the, you know, that a vote for Biden is not just a not Trump? You know, what do you think are the things that are important for people to hear? This is why you should vote for me. This is what I will do for you, what we will do together.
I agree with everything Scott said, but I also just think, more generally speaking, he also just has to be very inspiring. Like, people are still, you know, so many people are still out of work. So many people are depressed right now economically, and just out of boredom and out of how different the world is right now. And just some words of hope and inspiration, super general, but I think that could really just, you know, as much as a presidential candidate leans on those sort of general words of hope and inspiration, I think now more than ever, that is really, really, if he gives some outstanding monologue that really maybe sparks some hope in a lot of people, I think that can just really go miles for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they have to factor on having the spectacle in some point, and you know, it's a little difficult to do when you're not doing it as a live event. But I don't know, maybe if Biden has a crack digital production team, they might be able to do some fun things like circle wipes and star wipes when they're doing the transitions. So I know that I would appreciate that. Well, I am looking forward to seeing what it is. I am looking forward to not doing this show live at like 11 o'clock, or actually I guess our time, we didn't have to do it that late, but Scott, as we did 4 years ago, we started Trump versus Hillary, which is what it was at the time, doing the show where we did the conventions, and every night we were there late. And now you have a leisurely Friday morning to mull it all over and share it with each and all of you. So hopefully you subscribe to this Bladtcast YouTube page, BLADTCAST, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Scott Moore, where do people find you?
You can find me trolling Trump and Mitch McConnell on Twitter at SMAN80. That's SMAN80.
And Tamra, where do people
Well,
find
I'd say you can find me on TikTok, but I guess that's not going to last much
Not
longer.
for long. Not
Well,
for long, no.
So I don't know. Just Hey Tamra _ on Twitter. Hey Tamra on Instagram. I've really gotten into roller skating lately, so I'm going to be joining the roller disco bandwagon on
Sweet.
Instagram and TikTok. My
it.
hand is bruised right now from a skating injury.
Well, so that right there, that's what I follow. See, if that was TikTok, I'd almost sign up for TikTok just so I could see it, but then I'm gonna end up on some list if I'm on TikTok, and I don't want to be erased one night in the middle of the night because I happen to download TikTok. But on that cheerful note, thank you to everyone.
Bladt is over party.
Oh, it's coming. Believe
tomorrow
me, it's coming.
Wake up.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined us, and please leave comments if you're watching after the fact. We always love to hear from everyone, and we will read them on our next show. We will see you next Friday, right around noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be reacting to week 1 of the conventions. So join us then. But until then, thanks everyone. We'll see you soon.